The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Kate Middleton sat at the breakfast table. Her fingers wrapped around a delicate china cup filled with Earl Grey tea, but she had not taken a single sip. The steam rose gently from the cup, creating tiny clouds that disappeared into the air. William sat across from her reading the morning papers, but he kept glancing up at his wife with growing concern. Something was terribly wrong, and William could feel it in his bones. For the past 3 weeks, Kate had been different. She would start conversations and then trail off mid-sentence, staring into space as if her mind had traveled somewhere far away. Her usual bright laughter that filled their home had become forced and hollow. Even the children had noticed, asking William privately why Mummy seemed so sad lately. Kate pushed her untouched breakfast around her plate with a silver fork. The scrambled eggs had grown cold and the toast remained unbitten. Her phone sat next to her plate, and every few minutes it would light up with a notification. Each time it did, Kate would tense up her shoulders, rising slightly as if preparing for bad news. William watched this pattern repeat itself and felt his worry deepen. The children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, had finished their breakfast earlier and were now playing in the garden. Their joyful shouts and laughter drifted through the open windows. But instead of bringing a smile to Kate's face, as it usually did, the sound seemed to make her even more melancholy. She turned her head toward the window, watching her children play, and William saw tears gathering in her eyes. William folded his newspaper and set it aside. He had been patient for weeks, hoping that Kate would open up to him when she was ready. But he could not bear to watch her suffer in silence any longer. The woman he loved was drowning in something, and he felt helpless watching from the shore. He reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. "Kate, you're scaring me," William said softly, his voice filled with love and concern. "You have not been yourself for weeks, and I can see you are carrying something heavy. Please talk to me. Whatever it is, we will face it together." Kate looked up at him, and for a moment William saw the full depth of her pain reflected in her green eyes. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but then closed it again, shaking her head slightly. "I am fine," she whispered, but her voice cracked on the words betraying the lie. William moved his chair closer to hers and took both of her hands in his. "Kate, you are not fine, and that is okay. But you do not have to carry whatever this is alone. I am your husband, and I want to help you. Please let me in." The tears that had been threatening to fall finally spilled over and rolled down Kate's cheeks. She pulled her hands free and wiped at her face with trembling fingers. William waited patiently, knowing that pushing too hard would only cause her to retreat further into herself. The truth was that Kate had been living with a secret that felt like a heavy stone in her chest. 3 weeks ago, she had received a phone call that changed everything. Dr. Sarah Matthews had called with the results of some tests Kate had taken the month before. Kate had been experiencing some concerning symptoms for months, but had tried to dismiss them as stress or fatigue from her busy royal schedule. The symptoms had started small. She would feel dizzy during public appearances and would have to grip William's arm to steady herself. She began experiencing severe headaches that would last for days, leaving her feeling nauseous and unable to concentrate. Her energy levels dropped dramatically, and simple tasks that used to be easy became exhausting. Initially, Kate had hidden these symptoms from everyone, including William. She convinced herself that it was just the pressure of royal life catching up with her. She increased her vitamin intake, tried to get more sleep, and hoped the problems would resolve themselves. But as weeks turned into months, the symptoms only got worse. Finally, Kate had secretly made an appointment with Dr. Matthews, a specialist who had treated other members of the royal family. The doctor had been thorough, running a series of tests and scans. Kate had gone to these appointments alone, telling William she was attending charity meetings or having lunch with friends. The lies had eaten away at her, but she told herself she was protecting her family from unnecessary worry. When Dr. Matthews called 3 weeks ago, Kate had been in her private study at Kensington Palace. The doctor's voice had been gentle but serious. As she explained the test results, the words had hit Kate like a physical blow, leaving her gasping for breath. She had managed to thank the doctor and schedule a follow-up appointment, but the moment she hung up the phone, she had collapsed into her chair and sobbed. Since that phone call, Kate had been living in a strange twilight world. She continued with her royal duties, smiling and waving at crowds, cutting ribbons and giving speeches. But inside, she felt like she was screaming. Every night, she lay awake next to William, wanting desperately to tell him, but not knowing how to find the words. How do you tell the person you love most in the world that everything might be about to change? The worst part was watching William worry about her. She could see the concern in his eyes, the way he would study her face when he thought she was not looking. She knew her behavior was confusing and frightening him, but she felt trapped by her own fear and uncertainty. Now, sitting at their breakfast table with William looking at her with such love and worry, Kate felt the walls she had built around her secret beginning to crumble. She loved this man more than life itself, and keeping this from him was tearing her apart. But she was also terrified of what would happen when she finally spoke the words out loud. William continued to wait patiently, his blue eyes never leaving her face. He reached up and gently brushed away one of her tears with his thumb. Whatever it is, Kate, we will get through it together. You are the strongest person. I know, but you do not have to be strong alone. Kate took a shaky breath and looked into her husband's eyes. She could see her own fear reflected there, but she could also see his unwavering love and support. Maybe it was time to stop carrying this burden alone. Maybe it was time to let William help her carry the weight of what was coming next. Kate stared at William's face and saw nothing but pure love looking back at her. His thumb was still gently wiping away her tears, and his other hand held hers with such tenderness that it made her heart ache. She had spent 3 weeks building walls around her secret, but in this moment those walls felt paper thin. The words she had been holding back were fighting to escape, and she could feel her resolve crumbling with each passing second. "William, I need to tell you something," Kate whispered, her voice so quiet he had to lean closer to hear her. Her hands were shaking now, and William could feel the tremors through her fingers. He squeezed her hands gently, encouraging her to continue without saying a word. He knew that whatever she was about to tell him would change everything. 3 weeks ago I got a phone call," Kate began, then stopped as her throat seemed to close up. She took a deep breath and tried again. It was from Dr. Matthews. "You remember, I told you I had been feeling tired lately and having some headaches." William nodded, remembering how Kate had mentioned feeling unwell, but had always brushed off his concerns, saying it was just stress. "I went to see her without telling you," Kate continued, and William felt a small stab of hurt that she had kept this from him. "I did not want to worry you over something that might be nothing. She ran some tests and scans and told me she would call with the results." William's stomach began to twist with dread as he realized where this conversation was heading. Kate paused again and looked down at their joined hands. She could not bring herself to look at William's face when she said the next words. "The call came 3 weeks ago while you were at that meeting with your father." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The tests showed something, William, something that is not supposed to be there." William felt his heart stop beating for a moment. The breakfast room suddenly felt too small and too quiet. He could hear his own breathing and the distant sound of their children playing outside, but everything else seemed muted. What kind of something, he asked, though part of him did not want to know the answer. "A growth," Kate said, the word hanging in the air between them like a heavy cloud. "In my brain. It is small right now, but it is there, and it should not be there." The tears were flowing freely now, and she finally looked up at William's face. She saw her own fear reflected in his eyes, but also something else. Determination. William felt like the world had tilted sideways. His beautiful wife, his partner in everything, was telling him that there was something growing in her brain that did not belong there. For a moment he could not speak, could not even breathe. But then his training as a future king kicked in. He forced himself to stay calm for Kate's sake. "Okay," William said slowly, his voice steadier than he felt. "What did Dr. Matthews say about treatment? What are our options?" He used the word "are," deliberately wanting Kate to know that whatever came next, they would face it together. Kate felt a rush of love for her husband at his immediate acceptance and support. "She wants to do more tests," Kate explained. "More detailed scans to get a better picture of exactly what we are dealing with. Then she will refer us to a specialist who deals with these kinds of things. She said that because it is small and was caught early, there are good treatment options available." William nodded, processing this information. "When is the next appointment?" he asked. Kate looked surprised by his assumption that he would be involved. "Tomorrow afternoon," she said. "I was going to go alone like before." William shook his head firmly. "No, Kate, you are not doing this alone anymore. I am coming with you to every appointment, every test, every meeting. We are in this together." Kate felt tears of relief this time instead of fear. She had been so afraid that William would be angry with her for keeping this secret, or that he would panic and make everything worse. Instead, he was being exactly the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Why did you not tell me sooner?" William asked, gently. Kate looked ashamed and pulled one of her hands free to wipe her eyes. "I was scared," she admitted. "Scared of what it might mean for us, for the children, for everything. I kept thinking maybe if I just ignored it, or if I waited a little longer, it might somehow go away, or turn out to be a mistake." William understood her fear, but it also hurt him to think of Kate carrying this burden alone for 3 weeks. "Sweetheart, nothing you could tell me would ever make me love you less, or want to face it without you. That is what marriage means. We promised in sickness and in health. Remember?" Kate nodded and managed a small smile through her tears. "I remember," she said. "I just got so scared, William. What if this changes everything? What if I cannot be the wife you need, or the mother the children need? What if the treatment makes me different, or sick, or—" William moved his chair even closer and pulled Kate into his arms. He held her tight against his chest, and she could hear his heart beating fast under her ear. "Listen to me, Catherine," he said, using her full name, which he only did when he wanted her to pay close attention. "You are not just my wife, you are my best friend, my partner, my everything. Whatever this thing is, we will fight it together, and we will win." "But what if we cannot win?" Kate whispered into his chest. "What if the treatment does not work? Or what if it is worse than they think?" William pulled back slightly so he could look into her eyes. "Then we will face that together too," he said firmly. "But right now we do not know what we are dealing with exactly. Let us take this one step at a time, and not borrow trouble from tomorrow." Kate felt some of the weight she had been carrying lift from her shoulders. She was still scared, terrified actually, but she no longer felt alone. William was right. They did not know exactly what they were facing yet, and there was no point in imagining the worst-case scenarios. For now, it was enough that her secret was finally out in the open, and that William was beside her, ready to fight whatever came next. The children's voices grew louder as they ran closer to the house, and both William and Kate looked toward the door. "When do we need to think about how to tell them?" William said quietly. Kate nodded, knowing that this conversation with the children would be one of the hardest things she had ever had to do. William and Kate sat in silence for several minutes after her revelation. The weight of what she had just shared hung between them like a thick fog. William kept his arms around Kate while his mind raced with 1,000 thoughts and questions. He wanted to be strong for her, but inside his heart was breaking. The woman he loved more than life itself was facing something terrifying, and he felt helpless to protect her from it. Kate could feel William's body tense against hers, and she knew he was struggling to process everything she had told him. She pulled back slightly to look at his face, and saw that his jaw was clenched tight and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I am so sorry I did not tell you sooner," she whispered, touching his cheek gently. "I was just so scared, and I did not know how to find the words." William caught her hand and pressed it against his face. "You have nothing to apologize for," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I understand why you needed time to process this yourself, but from now on, we face everything together. No more secrets, no more carrying this alone." Kate nodded and felt another wave of relief wash over her. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made them both look toward the door. George appeared in the doorway, still in his school uniform with his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mummy, why are you crying?" he asked with the direct honesty that only children possess. His young face was creased with worry as he looked between his parents. Kate quickly wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. "I am fine, darling," she said, forcing a smile. "Just having a grown-up conversation with Daddy." George did not look convinced, but he nodded anyway. Charlotte and Louis appeared behind him also, back from their morning activities, and the breakfast room suddenly felt full of youthful energy. "Can we have lunch now?" Charlotte asked, bouncing on her toes. "I am starving," and Cook said she was making my favorite soup today. Kate looked at the clock and realized it was already past noon. They had been talking for over 2 hours, and she had completely lost track of time. "Of course, sweetheart," Kate said, standing up and smoothing down her dress. Why do you all go wash your hands and I will ask cook to serve lunch?" The children scattered toward the stairs, chattering excitedly about their morning adventures. Kate watched them go with a mixture of love and heartbreak. How could she tell these innocent, beautiful children that their mother might be sick? William stood up and moved behind Kate, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "They will be okay," he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Children are stronger than we give them credit for." Kate leaned back against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "We need to decide what to tell them and when," Kate said. "I do not want to lie to them, but I also do not want to scare them unnecessarily." William nodded, understanding her dilemma. "Maybe we should wait until after your appointment tomorrow," he suggested. "Once we know more about what we are dealing with, we can decide how much to share." Kate turned in his arms to face him. "What if the news is worse than we think?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if the specialist says there is nothing they can do or that the treatment is too dangerous?" William cupped her face in his hands and looked directly into her eyes. "Then we will deal with that when it happens," he said firmly. "But right now we do not know what the specialist will say. For all we know, this could be something that is easily treatable. We cannot spend our energy worrying about possibilities that may never happen." Kate knew he was right, but it was hard not to let her mind wander to dark possibilities. She had spent 3 weeks imagining every worst-case scenario, and it was difficult. To stop that pattern of thinking, William seemed to sense her internal struggle and pulled her closer. "I know it is hard not to worry," he said softly, "but we need to focus on what we can control right now. We can make sure you get the best medical care possible. We can support each other through whatever comes next, and we can continue to be the best parents we can be to our children." The children's voices echoed from upstairs as they washed their hands and prepared for lunch. Kate listened to their laughter and felt her heart swell with love for them. They deserved to have both their parents healthy and happy. They deserved to grow up without the shadow of illness hanging over their family. "I want to fight this," William Kate said with sudden determination. "Whatever it takes, whatever the treatment involves, I want to fight it. I am not ready to leave you or the children. I have too much life left to live." William felt a surge of pride at her words. This was the Kate he had fallen in love with, strong and determined and ready to face any challenge. "That is my girl," he said, smiling at her for the first time since their conversation began. "We will fight this together, and we will win." Kate smiled back, feeling some of her fear transform into resolve. She might be scared, but she was not going to give up. Without a battle, they walked hand in hand toward the dining room where the children were already seated around the table. Cook had indeed prepared Charlotte's favorite soup, and the smell of fresh bread filled the air. For a moment, Kate allowed herself to pretend that everything was normal, that this was just another ordinary family lunch. George looked up as they entered, and Kate noticed that he was still studying her face with concern. "Are you sure you are okay, Mummy?" he asked again. Kate sat down next to him and ruffled his hair affectionately. "I am okay, darling," she said, and meant it more than she had in weeks. "Daddy and I are going to take care of everything." William took his seat at the head of the table and looked around. At his family, his wife was facing the biggest challenge of her life, and his children had no idea how much their world might be about to change. But in this moment, surrounded by the people he loved most in the world, he felt something he had not felt in weeks. Hope. The afternoon stretched ahead of them, full of ordinary family activities and routines. Tomorrow would bring the specialist appointment and more answers about what they were facing. But for now, they had each other, and Kate had finally shared her burden with the person who loved her most. Whatever came next, they would face it together as a family. The next morning arrived faster than Kate had hoped. She had barely slept the night before, tossing and turning while her mind raced with worry about the specialist appointment. William had held her close all night, occasionally whispering words of comfort when he felt her body tense with anxiety. Neither of them spoke about their fears, but both knew the other was wide awake, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what the day might bring. Kate stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying to decide what to wear to the appointment. It seemed like such a silly thing to worry about, but somehow choosing the right outfit felt important. She wanted to look put together and strong, not like someone who was falling apart. William watched her from across the room as she held up different blouses and skirts, trying to make a decision. "You look beautiful in anything," William said softly, coming up behind her and placing his hands on her shoulders. Kate met his eyes in the mirror and saw her own worry reflected there. "What if the news is really bad today?" she asked for the 100th time since yesterday. "What if this thing in my brain is something terrible?" William turned her around to face him and took her hands in his. "Then we will deal with it," he said simply. "We will get the best doctors, find the best treatment, and we will fight it with everything we have. But Kate, we cannot know what the specialist will say until we actually speak with him." Kate nodded and tried to push down the panic that kept rising. In her chest, she had managed to get through breakfast with the children acting as normal as possible. George had still been watching her carefully, but Charlotte and Louis seemed oblivious to the tension their parents were carrying. They had chatted happily about their school day ahead and their weekend plans. The drive to the specialist office was quiet. William had arranged for their security detail to be extra discreet, knowing that Kate did not want any public attention during this difficult time. She stared out the window watching London pass by and thinking about how different everything looked when you were scared. The same streets and buildings she had driven past hundreds of times before seemed foreign and unwelcoming. Dr. Harrison's office was located in one of London's most prestigious medical buildings. The waiting room was decorated in calming blues and greens, with soft classical music playing in the background. Kate appreciated the effort to create a peaceful atmosphere, but nothing could calm the storm of anxiety in her chest. William sat beside her, holding her hand and occasionally squeezing it gently. When Dr. Harrison finally called them into his office, Kate felt her legs go weak. William steadied her with his arm around her waist, and they walked together into the consultation room. Dr. Harrison was younger than Kate had expected, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that immediately put her somewhat at ease. "Please sit down," Dr. Harrison said, gesturing to 2 comfortable chairs across from his desk. "I have reviewed all of your test results from Dr. Matthews, and I have some information to share with you." Kate felt her heart hammering in her chest as she waited for him to continue. William reached over and took her hand, giving her strength. "The good news is that what we found is not cancer," Dr. Harrison began, and Kate felt like she could breathe again for the first time in weeks. "It appears to be a benign growth, what we call a meningioma. These are much more common than people realize, and while they do need to be treated, they are generally not life-threatening." Kate felt tears of relief streaming down her face. "Not cancer," she repeated, as if saying the words out loud would make them more real. Dr. Harrison smiled and nodded. "That is correct. However, we do need to monitor it carefully and discuss treatment options, because even benign growths can cause problems if they continue to get larger." William felt like a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The past 24 hours had been filled with his worst fears about losing Kate, and now this doctor was telling them it was not the death sentence he had been imagining. "What kind of treatment are we looking at?" he asked, trying to focus on practical matters. Dr. Harrison pulled up some images on his computer screen showing Kate's brain scans. "The growth is quite small right now," he explained, pointing to a tiny spot on the scan. "We have several options. We can monitor it closely with regular scans to see if it grows. If it does start to get larger, we can treat it with targeted radiation therapy, which is very effective for this type of growth." Kate studied the image of her own brain, feeling strange about seeing inside her own head. "Will I need surgery?" she asked. Dr. Harrison shook his head. "Surgery is rarely necessary for meningiomas this small. The radiation therapy I mentioned is done as an outpatient procedure. You would come in for treatments over several weeks, but you could go home each day." "What about side effects?" Kate asked. She was feeling more hopeful, but still worried about how treatment might affect her daily life and her responsibilities as a mother and royal. Dr. Harrison explained that the side effects from modern radiation therapy were much milder than in the past. She might experience some fatigue and headaches during treatment, but most patients were able to continue with their normal activities. "How soon do we need to start treatment?" William asked. Dr. Harrison looked back at the scans and considered the question. "We will want to do another scan in 3 months to see if there has been any growth. If it remains stable, we can continue monitoring. If it shows signs of growing, then we would recommend starting treatment right away." Kate felt like she was in a dream. Just yesterday, she had been convinced she was dying, and now this doctor was telling her that her condition was treatable and not immediately dangerous. She looked at William and saw the same relief and hope in his eyes that she was feeling. They spent another 30 minutes with Dr. Harrison discussing the details of her condition and the monitoring plan. He gave them printed information to take home and scheduled the next scan for 3 months away. As they prepared to leave his office, Kate felt lighter than she had in weeks. Walking back to their car, Kate turned to William with tears in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude and relief. "We are going to be okay," she said, and for the first time in weeks, she actually believed it. William pulled her into his arms, right there on the sidewalk, not caring who might see them. "We are going to be more than okay," he said. "We are going to be great." The car ride home from Dr. Harrison's office felt completely different from the morning journey. Kate sat with her hand in William's, watching the same London streets pass by, but now everything looked brighter and more alive. The weight that had been pressing on her chest for weeks was finally lifting, and she could breathe freely again. William kept glancing over at her with a smile on his face that had not been there for a long time. As they pulled through the gates of Kensington Palace, Kate felt like she was seeing her home with new eyes. The familiar red brick walls and manicured gardens looked more beautiful than ever. She had been so afraid that she might have to leave all of this behind, but now she knew she would be here to watch her children. Kate time to process everything they had learned. They walked hand in hand into their private sitting room and collapsed onto the sofa together. Kate curled up against William's side, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "I cannot believe it is not cancer," Kate said, her voice filled with wonder and relief. "For 3 weeks, I was so sure I was dying. I kept imagining you having to raise the children alone and missing their weddings and grandchildren." "Are not going anywhere," William said firmly. "Dr. Harrison said this type of growth is very treatable, and you heard him say that most people go on to live completely normal lives." Kate nodded, but she could see that William was still processing everything, too. Even though the news had been much better than their worst fears, it was still a lot to take in. They spent the next hour talking through all the information Dr. Harrison had given them. Kate pulled out the printed materials he had provided, and they read through them together. William asked questions about the monitoring schedule and what signs they should watch for. Kate appreciated how he was already thinking ahead and making plans. "We need to tell the children," William said eventually. "They have been worried about you, and they deserve to know what is happening." Kate agreed, but she was nervous about having that conversation. How do you explain to young children that their mother has something growing in her brain that should not be there? "We will keep it simple. We tell them that Mummy has been having some headaches, and the doctors found the reason why. We explain that it is not dangerous, but the doctors need to keep an eye on it to make sure it stays small." Kate thought about this approach and decided it sounded right. "What about our royal duties?" Kate asked. "Do we need to tell anyone else about this?" The question carefully. He knew they would need to inform certain key people, but he wanted to protect Kate's privacy as much as possible. "They will need to know in case we need to adjust our schedules for appointments. We should also tell your parents and Pippa, but beyond that, I think we can keep this private until we know more about whether you will need treatment." Kate agreed with this plan. She was not ready to deal with public speculation about her health, and she wanted to focus on her family and her recovery. The thought of newspaper headlines and royal watchers discussing her medical condition made Kate took a deep breath, preparing herself for the conversation they were about to have. William squeezed her hand reassuringly, and they both stood up to meet their children. George, Charlotte, and Louis burst through the front door full of energy and stories about their school day. They dropped their backpacks in the hallway and ran toward the sitting room, chattering excitedly. Kate felt her heart swell with love as she watched them. "Today," Kate asked, pulling Charlotte into a hug. Charlotte launched into a detailed story about her art class, while Louis climbed onto William's lap. George hung back slightly, still watching his mother with the careful attention he had shown for weeks. After they had heard about everyone's day, William suggested they all sit down together, because he and sensed the serious tone and gathered around their parents on the large sofa. "We went to see a special doctor today to find out why." The children listened attentively, their young faces serious. George nodded, remembering how his mother had been rubbing her temples and seeming tired. "The doctor found that there is a tiny growth in Mummy's brain that is causing the headaches." Kate continued. She could see alarm starting to form on their Faces so, she quickly added, but the good news is that it is not dangerous and the doctors know exactly how to take care of it. Is it cancer? Charlotte asked, with the directness that children possess. Kate shook her head immediately. No, sweetheart, it is not cancer. It is something much less serious that lots of people have. The doctors just need to watch it carefully and make sure it stays small. Will you have to go to the hospital? Louis asked, climbing into Kate's lap. Kate hugged him close, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair. But now he spoke up. Is that why you've been sad lately, Mummy? He asked. Kate felt tears prick her eyes at her son's perceptive question. Yes, darling, she said honestly. But now I know what is wrong, and I feel much better. The family spent the rest of the evening together, playing games and talking. Kate noticed that all three children stayed closer to her than usual, as if they needed extra reassurance that she was really okay. She made sure to give them extra hugs and kisses, letting them know that she was not going anywhere as they prepared. For bed that night, Kate felt more peaceful than she had in weeks. The secret was finally out in the open, her family knew what was happening, and they were all united in facing whatever came next. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they were all together and safe. The autumn leaves were turning golden outside the windows of Kensington Palace, and Kate felt like her life had been transformed just as dramatically. As the changing seasons, the fear that had consumed her for weeks had gradually been replaced by gratitude, hope, and a deeper appreciation for every ordinary moment with her family. Today was the day of her follow-up scan, and Kate felt surprisingly calm as she prepared for the appointment. She had been having regular checkups with Dr. Harrison, and her headaches had become much less frequent. More importantly, she had learned to live without the constant worry that had nearly overwhelmed her. During those dark weeks of keeping her diagnosis secret, William knocked softly on their bedroom door and entered, carrying a cup of her favorite tea. Ready for today? He asked, sitting on the edge of the bed beside her. Kate smiled and accepted the tea gratefully. She was ready and no longer filled with the paralyzing fear that had marked their first visit to Dr. Harrison. The children had adapted. George had appointed himself as Kate's special helper, always asking if she needed anything and making sure she remembered to take her vitamins. Charlotte had drawn dozens of pictures of happy families and rainbows, which she presented to Kate whenever she seemed tired. Louis had simply increased his cuddle time, making sure to spend extra minutes in his mother's arms each day. William had been Kate's rock throughout the entire experience. He had attended every appointment, taken notes during medical consultations, and researched everything he could about her condition. Kate and William chatted about their weekend plans and the children's upcoming school events. Kate marveled at how normal everything felt compared to 3 months ago when she had been convinced she was dying. Dr. Harrison greeted them warmly in his office, and Kate could see from his expression that he had good news to share. The scan results were exactly what they had hoped for, he announced, pulling up the images on his computer screen. William reached over and squeezed her hand, smiling broadly. What does this mean for the future? Kate asked. Dr. Harrison explained that the stable results were very encouraging and meant they could continue with monitoring rather than moving to active treatment. We will schedule your next scan for 6 months from now, Dr. Harrison said. If it continues to remain stable, we can eventually move to yearly monitoring. Many people with this condition go decades without any changes and live completely normal lives. Kate felt tears of gratitude in her eyes as she thanked Dr. Harrison. She thought back to that morning 3 months ago when she had been terrified to tell William her secret. If someone had told her then that she would be sitting here today feeling hopeful and healthy, she would never have believed it as they left the medical building. Kate turned to William with a radiant smile. I want to celebrate, she said, surprising herself with a declaration. I want to do something special with the children to mark this moment. William grinned back at her, loving the joy and energy he saw on her face. They decided to surprise the children by picking them up early from school and taking them to their favorite restaurant for lunch. When George, Charlotte, and Louis saw their parents arrive unexpectedly at school, they were thrilled. Kate explained that the doctor had given her excellent news, and they were celebrating at the restaurant. Kate watched her children laugh and chat over their favorite meals and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had come so close to losing all of this, and now she had been given the gift of knowing she would be here for countless more family meals and celebrations. William ordered champagne for the adults and special milkshakes for the children. He raised his glass in a toast to Kate's good news and to their family's strength in facing challenges together. Kate felt her heart swell with love for this man who had stood by her through her darkest fears. That evening, after the children were in bed, Kate and William sat together in their private sitting room, reflecting on the journey they had been through. Kate realized that while her diagnosis had been terrifying, it had also taught her valuable lessons about what truly mattered in life. "I am grateful for what happened, William," she said quietly. "Not grateful to be sick, but grateful for what it taught me about appreciating every day and not taking our time together for granted." William nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "You are the strongest person I know," he told her. "The way you faced your fears and fought through this has made me love you even more than I thought possible." Kate leaned against him, feeling completely content and at peace. They talked about their plans for the future, and Kate felt excited about all the possibilities ahead of her. She wanted to be more present with the children, to take more family trips, and to not worry so much about small problems that did not really matter. Her health scare had given her a new perspective on what was truly important. As they prepared for bed that night, Kate stood at their bedroom window, looking out at the gardens of Kensington Palace. 6 months ago, she had stood at this same window, wondering if she would live to see another spring. Now she knew she would see many more springs and summers and autumns with the people she loved most. William came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Kate leaned back against him and smiled. "I am thinking about how lucky we are," she said. "How lucky I am to have you and the children and this beautiful life." The next morning, Kate woke up feeling lighter and more hopeful than she had in months. She had faced her biggest fear and come through it stronger and more grateful than before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could handle them with William by her side and her children filling her life with joy and purpose. Kate had learned that sometimes the things that scare us most turn out to be manageable, and that sharing our fears with the people we love makes us stronger, not weaker. She had also learned that every ordinary day is actually a gift worth celebrating.